And now the activity begins in the chambers.
Mr. Speaker.
Zambia, proud and free, land of work and joy, unity. Lead us in the struggle for the right. We won freedom's fight. Oh, one, strong and free. Africa is our own motherland. Fashioned in a place by God's good hand. Let us all our people join as one. Brothers under the sun. Oh, one, strong and free. One land and one nation is our cry. Dignity and peace is Zambia's fight. Like a noble eagle in its flight, Zambia, praise to thee, oh one, strong and free. Ready to praise thee, praise thee, praise thee. Let's praise Zambia, Zambia, Zambia. Free make me stand under the flag. Prayer. Almighty God, who in your infinite wisdom and providential goodness has appointed the officers of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to consider with your abundant favor us your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of such important responsibilities in this land. Let your blessing descend upon us, here in Parliament assembled, and grant that we may, as in your presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen. acting lead of government business indicate business of the House for next week?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I rise to acquaint the House with some idea of the business it will consider next week. Sir, on Tuesday, 3rd October 2017, the business of the House will begin with questions for oral answer, if there will be any. This will be followed by presentation of government bills, if there will be any. Thereafter, the House will commence the debate on the motion of supply on the 2018 national budget, which the Honorable Minister of Finance will present today. Sir, on Wednesday, 4th October 2017, the business of the House will start with questions for oral answer, if there will be any. This will be followed by presentation of government bills, if there will be any. Thereafter, the House will consider private members' motions, if there will be any. The House will then continue with the debate on the motion of supply on the 2018 national budget. Sir, on Thursday, 5th October 2017, the business of the House will commence with questions for oral answer, if there will be any. This will be followed by presentation of government bills, if there will be any. Thereafter, the House will continue with the debate on the motion of supply on the 2018 national budget. Mr. Speaker, on Friday, 6th October 2017, the business of the House will start with the Vice President's question time. This will be followed by questions for oral answer, if there will be any. Thereafter, the House will deal with the presentation of government bills, if there will be any. The House will then continue with the debate on the motion of supply on the 2018 national budget. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Notice of motion. The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House do now resolve into Committee of Supply on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the year 1st January 2018 to 31st December 2018, presented to the National Assembly on Friday, 29th September 2017. Sir, I'm a bearer of a message from His Excellency, Mr. Edgar Chagwalungu, the President of the Republic of Zambia, recommending favorable consideration of the motion that are now laid on the table.
The question is that the House do now resolve into Committee of Supply on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the year 1st January 2018 to 31st December 2018, presented to the National Assembly in September 2017. Any debate? The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, this is the second address since I was granted this rare and momentous task to serve as Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, the work has not been easy, but collectively we have made notable successes as I shall highlight. I once again, Mr. Speaker, wish to thank His Excellency, Mr. Edgar Chagwalungu, the President of the Republic of Zambia, for giving me this rare opportunity. My unreserved gratitude, Mr. Speaker, goes to my colleagues in Cabinet and to you, Mr. Speaker, and all the members of this august House and the Zambian people for the support in the performance of my duty. Further, I wish to applaud the church, the media, private sector, civil society organizations, and cooperating partners for their support in our development endeavors. Mr. Speaker, during the official opening of the second session of the 12th National Assembly, His Excellency, Mr. Edgar Chagwalungu, President of the Republic of Zambia, reminded the nation of the need to uphold national values and principles which are centered on patriotism and love for one another as enshrined in the national anthem, and I quote, "One land and one nation is our cry." I wish to reiterate the President's call, as it is critical if we are to effectively implement our development agenda and meet our aspiration as a nation without leaving anyone behind. Mr. Speaker, the people of Zambia deserve peace and stability, decent employment, quality of public service, and a conducive environment where they can thrive, create their own wealth, and prosper. Achieving these outcomes is a task with which the Zambian people have entrusted in us. Mr. Speaker, this we shall attain through the diligent pursuit of the strategic objectives contained in the recently launched 7th National Development Plan. We aspire to make a reality of the plan's theme, accelerating development efforts towards the Vision 2030 without leaving anyone behind. Mr. Speaker, during the 9 months of implementing the Economic Stabilization and Growth Program, dubbed Zambia Plus, a lot has been achieved. The Patriotic Front government is cognizant of the fact that our people deserve much more. We have made some strides, yet challenges remain. Youth unemployment, poverty levels remain high. To this end, government is resolved to work tenuously to uplift the well-being of our people and enhance their meaningful participation in the economy. Some inclusive growth is only possible if we are steadfast in our collective implementation of bold policy decisions and reforms. This year, government implemented austerity measures that have started showing some positive results in securing a sustainable growth going forward. Through these measures, Mr. Speaker, government significantly reduced the accumulation of arrears. As a result of the reforms, Zambia's credit rating outlook and investor confidence have improved. Government is mindful, Mr. Speaker, that despite the positive outlook, the measures in the short term have not yet favorably impacted on the welfare of our people. In the longer term, Mr. Speaker, we remain assured of inclusive growth and prosperity. Mr. Speaker, by working collectively, we can ensure that our goals and priorities are clearly defined. Our resolve for inclusive development remains unwavering. Our actions remain fiscally prudent. It is in this context that the theme for the 2018 budget is accelerating physical fitness for sustained inclusive growth without leaving anyone behind. Mr. Speaker, my address to this August House is in 4 parts. In part 1, I review the performance of the global and domestic economy during 2017 and present the outlook for the rest of the year. Part 2 outlines the macroeconomic objective, policies, and strategies for 2018. In part 3, I present the details of the 2018 budget, and in part 4, I conclude. Mr. Speaker, part 1, global and domestic economic development in 2017. Mr. Speaker, the global economy is projected to grow by 3.5% in 2017 compared to 3.2% in 2016. This is mainly premised on a projected 4.6% growth in large emerging and developing economies driven by the gradual improvement in commodity prices. Mr. Speaker, growth in the advanced economies is expected to strengthen to 2% in 2017 from 1.7% in 2016. Sub-Saharan Africa growth is projected to expand to 2.7% in 2017 from 1.3% in 2016, driven mainly by increased agriculture and mining output. Mr. Speaker, as the global economic activities gains momentum, commodity prices are expected to continue strengthening in 2017. Copper prices are projected to average $5,800 per ton in 2017. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, international crude oil prices are expected to surge upwards to an average of $49 per barrel in 2017 from an average of $42.8 per barrel in 2016. Mr. Speaker, the Zambian economy in 2017 has continued to rebound. Growth is expected to be above 4% from the 3.8% in 2016. The key drivers will be mining, agriculture, and manufacturing sectors, supported by improved electricity generation. It is worth noting that the Zambian economy has outpaced sub-Saharan African economic growth of 2.7%. This is a reflection, Mr. Speaker, of the sound economic policies that this government has been pursuing. Mr. Speaker, I repeat, this is a reflection of the sound economic policies that this government has been pursuing. Questions are good for democracy. Mr. Speaker, I now outline in detail the developments in the domestic economy. Mr. Speaker, crop production during the 2016-2017 farming season was favorable, with significant increases in output of maize, Irish potatoes, rice, tobacco, groundnuts, and soybeans. Mr. Speaker, growth in the fisheries subsector strengthened for both capture and aquaculture fisheries to 77,000 tons for the period January to June 2017 from 56,000 tons in the same period in 2016. This was explained by higher participation by commercial and emerging fish farmers in aquaculture and the investment of enforcement of fishery regulations in the capture fisheries. Mr. Speaker, in the livestock subsector, there was an increase in the livestock population to 4.9 million during the period January to June 2017 from 4.3 million in the same period in 2016. This was due to stocking and restocking programs and improved animal disease control programs. Mr. Speaker, on account of improved water levels, electricity generation in the first 8 months of 2017 increased by 24% to 9.4 million megawatt hours. This, Mr. Speaker, has significantly reduced the load shedding, creating better prospects for industrialization. Mr. Speaker, at the end of August 2017, copper production stood at 510,000 metric tons, with the end-year projection expected to exceed 770,000 metric tons. Mr. Speaker, following the initiative to modernize the Halimwanga Kumbula International Airport, tourist arrivals at the airport increased by 24% in the first half of 2017. We anticipate similar trends at Ndola and Lusaka once the modernization projects have been completed. Mr. Speaker, external factor performance. The performance of the external factor has improved relative to 2016. Zambia's trade balance recorded a surplus of $388 million during the first 6 months of 2017, compared to a surplus of $45.8 million during the corresponding period in 2016. This was mainly driven by higher export earnings relative to imports. Total export earnings were 25.8% higher at $3.9 billion. Mr. Speaker, copper export earnings were higher by 38% at $2.9 billion from $2.1 billion in the corresponding period last year. This was due to a rise in both export volumes and prices. Non-traditional exports, Mr. Speaker, however, marginally declined to $811.7 million during the first 6 months of 2017 from $835.5 million during the same period in 2016. Mr. Speaker, the gross international reserves as at the end of August 2017 were estimated at $2.3 billion, relatively unchanged from the end figure for last year, 2016. This translates into 3.2 months of import cover. Mr. Speaker, monetary and financial performance. The monetary performance in 2017 has been positive. The exchange rate of the kwacha against major tradable currencies has been relatively stable, appreciating by 4% to date. Mr. Speaker, inflation has fallen significantly to 6.6% in September 2017 from 18.9% during the same period in 2016. The Bank of Zambia eased monetary policy significantly in 2017. The policy rate was reduced from 15.5% in January to 11% in August 2017. The statutory reserve ratio reduced from 18% to 9.5% over the same period. The overall performance and condition of the financial sector remained satisfactory as at the end of August 2017. The banking sector also maintained a strong capital adequacy position and satisfactory earning performance. Mr. Speaker, despite the easing of monetary policy, commercial bank average lending rates only marginally fell to 26.6% in August 2017 from 29.4% in December. Private sector credit remained subdued, contracting by 2.9% as at the end of August 2017. Asset quality also deteriorated as reflected by the increase in non-performing loans to 12.2% relative to the total loans, compared to 9.7% as at the end of December 2016. This is above the international accepted threshold of 10%. However, measures are being taken to reverse this trend and to restore asset quality in the banking sector. Mr. Speaker, government has successfully restructured the Intermarket Banking Corporation that was closed last year. I'm glad to inform the House that the shareholder agreement for the new restructured bank has been concluded. The capital requirements have been met. The new bank will operate under the name of ZAMBIA Industrial Commercial Bank and will take over the assets of Intermarket Banking Corporation. Management for the restructured bank has been appointed and it will soon commence operations. Mr. Speaker, following the successful restructuring of Intermarket Banking Corporation, government is now repositioning the National Savings and Credit Bank and the Development Bank of Zambia to improve their governance structure and their capability in contributing to the development of the banking sector and the economy. The repositioning will include the restructuring of the National Savings and Credit Bank into a fully fledged commercial bank with private sector participation. Mr. Speaker, fiscal performance. The execution of the budget in 2017 remained challenging. Revenues and grants are projected to be below target by 7% at 42.1 billion by the close of 2017. This will be on account of the delayed and non-implementation of some of the measures, such as the use of fiscal devices, lower compliance in some tax types, and the non-disbursement of grants from some cooperating partners. In line with the fiscal consolidation stance, expenditure are projected to be below target by 6%. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, the deficit on cash basis is expected to close the year at 6.8% of GDP. Debt and arrears position. Mr. Speaker, the stock of government's external debt as at the end of August 2017 was US dollars 7.56 billion, representing 29% of GDP. The stock of domestic debt in the form of government securities was at 44.6 billion, representing 18% of GDP. The total public debt, external and domestic, at the end of August 2017 was therefore 114.9 billion, equivalent to 12.45 billion and representing 47% of GDP. I will, Mr. Speaker, subsequently outline the measures we are undertaking to comprehensively deal with the issue of debt. Mr. Speaker, the stock of domestic arrears as at the end of June 2017 was 13.2 billion. This, I repeat, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the stock of domestic arrears as at the end of June 2017 was 13.2 billion from 19.1 billion in December 2016. The significant reduction in arrears is attributable to government's concerted efforts to clear the arrears. Mr. Speaker, when you augment this with the amnesty that was declared, we have given life back to businesses. Mr. Speaker, Part 2, Macroeconomic Objectives, Policies, and Strategies for 2018. Mr. Speaker, accelerating fiscal fitness is critical for sustained inclusive growth, diversification, and job creation. These outcomes are in conformity with the strategic objectives of the 7th National Development Plan. In this regard, the macroeconomic objectives and policies for 2018 will be as follows. 1. To achieve real GDP growth of at least 5%. 2. Maintain single-digit inflation in the range of 6 to 8%. 3. Maintain international reserve of at least 3 months of import cover. 4. Attain domestic revenue mobilization of at least 17.7% of GDP. 5. Limit the fiscal deficit on a cash basis to 6.1% of GDP. 6. Limit domestic financing to no more than 4% of GDP. 7. Accelerate implementation of measures towards diversification of the economy. 8. Reduce the stock of arrears and curtail the accumulation of new arrears. And 9. Slow down on the contraction of new debt to ensure sustainability. Slow down. Pole. Mr. Speaker, key integrated multi-sectoral policies and intervention. Mr. Speaker, the 7th National Development Plan has adopted an integrated multi-sectoral approach to development. This entails that sectors have to work together in clusters to achieve the objectives of the plan. In this vein, the policy and structural interventions to be undertaken in 2018 will be aligned to the following 5 pillars of the plan. Pillar number 1, economic diversification and job creation. Pillar number 2, poverty and vulnerability reduction. Pillar number 3, reducing development inequalities. And 4, enhancing human development. 5, creating a conducive governance environment for a diversified and inclusive economy. Sir, there is need to create a supportive environment for effective implementation of the plan. This will be done by creating a stable macroeconomic environment and fiscal space while consolidating policy and structural reforms as outlined in the Economic Stabilization and Growth Plan. Mr. Speaker, I now outline the policies under each of the 5 pillars in the plan. Pillar number 1, economic diversification and job creation. Sir, the continued reliance on the mining sector has exposed the economy to volatility arising from external shock. Further, Mr. Speaker, owing to the high mechanization, the mining sector's ability to absorb the large number of youth entering the labor market each year is limited. There is, therefore, need to diversify the economy to labor-intensive sectors such as agriculture and tourism. Agriculture, livestock, and fisheries. Mr. Speaker, in transforming agriculture, diversification remains key. Government will implement measures aimed at raising farmer productivity as well as realizing diversification within the sector. One such measure is the introduction and development of a farm block model, of which 3 will come on board in 2018. These are in the Copper Belt, Muchinga, and northern provinces. This model is anchored on a core venture, agro-processing facilities, and smallholder farmers. This will further allow smallholders and emergent farmers to benefit from the technological transfer and have access to ready markets. In addition, Mr. Speaker, government is facilitating US $100 million public-private sector investment into a tractor and agricultural equipment assembly plant in Lusaka South Multi-Facility Economic Zone. The plant will be operational by the end of 2018. Further, government has obtained financing of $40 million from the Exim Bank of India that will be used for agriculture mechanization. Mr. Speaker, to maintain diversification drive, government during 2017 and 2018 farming season will fully migrate to e-voucher system to cover 1 million beneficiaries. Government has further put in place a new framework to eliminate ghost farmers and the duplication of beneficiaries. As a result of the cleanup, Mr. Speaker, a total number of 600 undeserving beneficiaries were removed, resulting in a saving of $1 billion. Mr. Speaker, in the 2017 budget, I announced that government would construct 18 artificial insemination centers to improve livestock production and breeds. I'm happy to inform this August House that 10 centers have since been completed and are operational. The remaining 8 are at various stages of development. Mr. Speaker, in the area of animal health, government will continue with animal disease prevention and control program across the country. To this effect, work on the 200 deep tanks will continue. In addition, the construction of 4 regional laboratories will be completed by the end of 2018. Mr. Speaker, given the rising market of potential livestock, especially goat and sheep, government will facilitate access to both local and foreign markets for livestock products. One such initiative, Mr. Speaker, is the export of 1 million goats to the Middle East. Mr. Speaker, you enjoy goats, eh? Mr. Speaker, with regards to fisheries, government in 2018 will promote cage fish farming on lakes Mweru, Kariba, Tanganyika, and Bangweulu, as well as along the Kafue River at Kasaka and in water bodies in Western Province. This is in an effort to improve the productivity and production to attain self-reliance. Mr. Speaker, government will continue the implementation of the $50 million Zambia Aquaculture Enterprise Development Project in 2018. This is aimed, among others, at building institutional capacity for fish, fingerlings, and feed production. Further, this will provide support to the private sector in the development of aquaculture value chain, including establishing fish feed plants, hatcheries, and freezing and processing facilities. Mr. Speaker, in the fisheries and livestock subsector, government is also currently undertaking a comprehensive livestock and aquaculture census, which will be finalized in 2018. The results of the census will guide policy formulation to facilitate growth and development. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the foregoing measures, government will enhance extension service provisions. In partnership with the private sector, government will work towards improving agriculture market information system and the development of functional markets. This is essential for sustained higher production, enhancement of agriculture value chains, raising of farmer incomes, and reduction of poverty. Some, to support the outlined measures, government will recruit 750 extension workers for the agriculture sector. Industrialization. Mr. Speaker, industrialization is key to the promotion of value addition and the attainment of government's economic diversification agenda. In order to facilitate expansion of the country's industrial base, the development of multi-facility economic zones and industrial parks will continue. In this regard, the process of setting up Kafue Steel and Iron, Kalumbila and Chembe multi-facility economic zones is underway. Mr. Speaker, in order to enhance on the operations of the existing zones and parks, government will in 2018 review their performance so as to identify and address the challenges affecting their operations. Sir, in the 2017 budget, I announced that government, working with the private sector, would set up the Agriculture and Industrial Credit Guarantee Scheme. I'm happy to report that this has been done. The scheme will facilitate access to affordable credit to the small and medium enterprises. Further, government will engage financial institutions to increase credit to the small and medium enterprises using movable assets as collateral in line with the provisions of the Movable Asset Act. In addition, to further enhance access to finance for the small and medium enterprises, government will include the use of securities and stocks as collateral. Mr. Speaker, tourism. Tourism marketing and partnership with the private sector in conservation remain central to tourism promotion. Emphasis will also be placed on ensuring that the creative sector becomes an integral part of economic development. Mr. Speaker, in order to reduce the cost of doing business and the unnecessary bureaucracies in the tourism sector, government will, together with the Business Regulatory Review Agency, establish and operationalize a single licensing system. Mr. Speaker, with regard to infrastructure development, government will, through an integrated approach, prioritize major roads, bridges, and airstrips leading to tourist destinations. Mr. Speaker, further, government will facilitate the development of requisite infrastructure to ease access to tourist sites, rehabilitate heritage sites, and strengthen wildlife protection. Mining. Mr. Speaker, policy consistency is critical to create and sustain investor confidence. Government is committed to ensuring that this continues. The focus in the mining sector in 2018 will be on broadening the tax base and enhancing of mineral production to include non-traditional minerals such as gemstones and industrial minerals, among others. Government will also strengthen the regulatory framework and enforcement in the sector to curb avoidance in payment of taxes and levies. Some, to enhance information provision and planning, government will in 2018 continue with the geological mapping program for the remaining 40% of the country. In addition, to promote inclusiveness within the mining sector, government will continue to support artisanal and small-scale miners through the development mineral capacity building program. Further, promotion of downstream value addition will be emphasized. Energy. Mr. Speaker, stable and reliable energy supply is critical to uplifting the welfare of our people and the productivity of business. Priority in the electricity subsector will be placed on increasing the energy mix through the promotion of off-grid electricity generation and alternative energy sources. In this regard, government will continue with the ongoing reforms in the sector to boost private sector participation. Mr. Speaker, in 2018, government will bring to this August House the Energy Regulatory Bill and the Electricity Bill for enactment. The Energy Regulatory Bill will allow for the enhanced supervision and regulation of the energy sector, while the Electricity Bill will, among others, allow for the participation of other players in the industry. Mr. Speaker, to ensure cost reflectivity in tariffs and encourage investment in the sector, government will, in 2018, finalize the cost of service study. The results will provide, Mr. Speaker, the basis for future adjustments to electricity tariffs. Mr. Speaker, to promote small and medium private sector investment in renewable energy, government will implement the Renewable Energy Feed-in Tariff Regulatory Framework. The target is to add 200 megawatts through this initiative in phase 1. I wish to inform this August House that financial closure on the scaling up solar project of 100 megawatts has been reached, and construction is expected to start in October 2017. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to inform this August House that the dam construction of the Kafue Gorge Lower 750 megawatt project is progressing work. Further, the work on the second phase of the 300 megawatt Mamba thermal plant is expected to commence in 2018. In addition, the 250 megawatt Kalungwishi hydropower project in the north will commence in 2018. Mr. Speaker, government, in collaboration with the Republic of Zimbabwe, has commenced preliminary financing arrangements for the development of the 2,400 megawatt Batoka hydro power project. In addition, Mr. Speaker, government has continued to work on linking Zambia to the Southern and Eastern African region through the Zambia-Tanzania-Kenya Interconnector Project. The project will enhance electricity trade, improve power security, ensure reliability of supply, and foster regional integration, connecting power, Mr. Speaker, for the first time from Cairo to Cape. Mr. Speaker, this is called energy. Mr. Speaker, in the 2017 budget address, government indicated the intention to disengage from direct procurement of finished products by March 2017. This is meant to remove the burden of oil procurement from Treasury, attain efficiencies, and promote private sector participation. This measure will take effect in the first quarter of 2018. Mr. Speaker, transport, infrastructure, and technology. Infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, it is often said that development follows infrastructure. Government in 2018 will continue the ongoing road infrastructure projects, including the Link Zambia 8000, the Lusaka 400, the Copperbelt 400 projects. To reduce congestion in Lusaka, the $240 million Lusaka City Traffic Decongestion Project, financed by cooperating partners, is expected to commence in 2018. Mr. Speaker, the recently launched Lusaka Ndola Juwe Carriage is one of the most Mr. Speaker, the recently launched Lusaka Ndola Juwe Carriageway is one of the most economic roads. Mr. Speaker, let me hasten to mention that these projects consist of two phases. This project consists of two phases. Mr. Speaker, in phase one will be the construction of the dual carriage way, whereas phase two involving the construction of ancillary infrastructure, which include hotels, toll gates, service stations. That is phase two. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, wait for the main issue. Mr. Speaker, phase one, Mr. Speaker, phase one will be financed through public-private initiatives. Phase one will be financed through public-private initiatives. Whereas phase two will be financed through private sector participation. Nothing will lean on government balance sheet, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Let's have some order. Let's have some order. Continue, Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for the sake of clarity, phase one will be financed by public-private initiatives, whereas phase two will be financed by the private sector. Meaning, Mr. Speaker, that government will not borrow $1 to do the projects. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the National Road Touring Program has proved to be successful in raising revenue for road maintenance and rehabilitation. In the first 8 months of 2017, government has raised almost 500 million kwacha. This is a sustainable way of ensuring that our road network is well maintained. In this regard, government will continue in 2018 to construct toll gates across the nation. Mr. Speaker, in my last budget address, I urged the pension funds to participate in the financing of development projects. I'm glad to report, honorable members, that NAPSA has taken up the challenge to finance the Ndola 2 Solwezi project at the cost of 2.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, for the sake of clarity, NAPSA will finance to the extent of 2.1 billion kwacha. The recovery of the invested funds will be through revenues from the toll gates to be constructed on the road. Mr. Speaker, I encourage other pension funds to take up the challenge to diversify their investment portfolio through such arrangements. Mr. Speaker, to further diversify the sources of financing for infrastructure development, government will, in 2018, set up an infrastructure development fund. Government will, in 2018, set up an infrastructure development fund. This will be financed through the proceeds of sale of government assets 1, pension fund participation 2, and the sale of infrastructure bonds. I bring you greetings from Porokoso, Honorable Kambwe. Mr. Speaker, in the rail transport, government will revitalize Zambia Railways Limited and concession Tazara. Further, Mr. Speaker, government will, through a public-private partnership arrangement, commence the development of the Chipata-Petaukem rail line. Through the public-private partnership arrangement. Mr. Speaker, the expansion and modernization of the Kenneth Kaunda International Airport is expected to be completed in 2018. Further, government has commenced the construction of the Commonwealth International Airport. Hundreds. Many more. Professor Lungwangwa. The dividends you speak about. Mr. Speaker, to improve ICT infrastructure, government will invest in and upgrade telecommunication networks, data centers, and access devices through the Smart Zambia Master Plan. This will improve the flow of information within and among government institutions, enterprises, and citizens to bring about the social and economic benefits. This is also aimed at transforming government's mode of delivery of public services from the traditional face-to-face interaction to online channels to ensure that citizens and businesses can access service anywhere and at any time. Mr. Speaker, government will also facilitate the upscaling of ICT skills for both public service and private sector workers. Government will also accelerate the mainstreaming of ICT culture in the Zambian education curriculum. This is to ensure early adaptation of sustainability of ICT-based solutions. Mr. Speaker, In order to achieve universal access to communication services, government is implementing a program to construct communication towers across the country. Under phase 1, government has concluded the construction of 240 communication towers. In 2018, government will commence the construction of 1,009 towers under the second phase of the unserved and underserved areas. So the whole Zambia will be connected. Mr. Speaker. In particular, Dundumwezi. Mr. Speaker, interventions under Pillar 1 are aimed at creating a supportive environment to stimulate economic diversification, job creation, as enshrined in the 7th National Development Plan. Sir, these interventions also underscore government's commitment to create jobs for our people. Pillar 2, Mr. Speaker, reducing poverty and vulnerability. Mr. Speaker, government remains resolute to reducing poverty and vulnerability among its citizens. Sir, in 2018, government will continue to implement policies, programs, and initiatives aimed at protecting and empowering vulnerable members in our communities. Mr. Speaker, to assist in planning, policy formulation, and eliminating duplication within the social protection programs, government is implementing the electronic registry of beneficiaries for all social protection programs. This has been piloted in 5 districts and will be rolled out to an additional 36 districts. Mr. Speaker, social cash transfer scheme. Mr. Speaker, government scaled up the social cash transfer in 2017 by increasing coverage and monthly payments to each beneficiary household. Further, the number of beneficiary households were increased from 242,000 in 2016 to 590,000 beneficiaries in 2017. Mr. Speaker, in 2018, the number of social cash transfer beneficiaries will be further increased to 700,000. In addition, government will fully migrate to an electronic social cash transfer platform using cell phones. Mr. Speaker, Public Welfare Assistance Scheme. Sir, in 2018, government will increase support under this program to 200,000 from 134,000 targeted beneficiaries this year. This will enable people to have access to education and health care. Food security pack. Mr. Speaker, in 2018-2019 farming season, government will increase the number of household beneficiaries under this program to 80,000 from 40,000 in the farming season 2017-2018. The objective of the program is to support the vulnerable but viable farmers. Homegrown school feeding program. Sir, the homegrown school feeding program has proved to be effective in increasing school attendance and combating malnutrition amongst our pupils. I wish to report that by the end of June this year, over 956,000 children were on the program in both government and community schools. The focus for 2018 will be to increase the number of learners on the program to 1.5 million from 1.2 projected at the end of 2017. Women Development Program. Mr. Speaker, government will continue to implement the Women's Development Program aimed at enhancing access to productive resources and entrepreneurship skills for poor and vulnerable women. Under this program, about 30,000 women will be empowered with productive grants and microcredit countrywide in 2018. In addition, government with the support from the World Bank is targeting to provide educational support to 16,000 girls from extremely poor households in 16 districts and a further 75,000 women with grants in 51 districts. Mr. Speaker, climate change and disaster risk reduction. Sir, Zambia has not been spared from the adverse effects of climate change, which has the potential to reverse our developmental gains. In this regard, government will implement strategies to mitigate and adopt the adverse effects of climate change. Some of the measures include the pilot project for climate change resilience currently being implemented in Western, Southern, and Central provinces. This intervention will also extend to Northern, Muchinga, and Wapula provinces. To address deforestation, government will undertake the $32.8 million integrated forestry landscape project in Eastern Province with the support of our cooperating partners. Further, government will strengthen the national disaster response system. Pension reforms. Mr. Speaker, in my address to this August House last year, I indicate government's intention to review legislation to ensure a pension system that is affordable, sustainable, and offers broad social security protection. I'm happy to report that the Social Protection Bill has now been finalized. Sir, among other things, the proposed legislation will include the establishment of a unified pension system, a national social security agency, a national social security fund, and provide for basic social protection, including health and maternity insurance. It will also provide for the self-employed and other pensioners to make contributions to the National Social Security Scheme. Mr. Speaker, these reforms will be a fundamental paradigm shift from the existing system and will help reduce destitution amongst our people. I therefore urge all honorable members of this august House to critically debate and support the bill when it's presented to the House. Pillar 3, reducing development inequalities. Mr. Speaker, government is concerned with the development inequalities that have existed between the rural and urban areas in terms of inadequate social service delivery, poor infrastructure, and financial exclusion, among others. Sir, government will, in 2018, prioritize the increased access to social service and the completion of ongoing education, health, and water and sanitation infrastructure in rural areas. In order to attract investment in rural areas, government will continue with the construction of economic infrastructure such as feeder roads, communication, and rural electrification infrastructure. Feeder roads, Mr. Speaker. Government is committed to upgrading, rehabilitating, and maintaining feeder roads to enhance the connectivity of rural areas to markets. Government will continue with the cooperating partner in this area, and we have since secured $200 million from the World Bank for rural connectivity projects. Just feeder roads, $200 million for next year. So all areas will be connected. Professor Lungongo. Decentralization. Sir, centralization of power, particularly in respect to resource control, decision-making, has hampered the attainment of equitable national development. In order to address this, government will in 2018 ensure that finances required to provide frontline public services and infrastructure projects at provincial and district levels are deconcentrated to the provincial administration. Mr. Speaker, to ensure participation of the citizenry in project identification, planning, evaluation, government will commence the devolution of powers from central government to lower level structures. This will help remove bureaucracy and enhance timely delivery of services. Mr. Speaker, to deliver services, councils need to raise substantial revenues from property rates. However, the procedural delays caused by processes set out in the 1997 Rating Act have led substantial revenue losses by the councils. To address these challenges in 2018, the Rating Act will be repealed and replaced to ensure that councils gain revenue, buoyancy, and adequacy from property rates. This will go a long way in establishing a sound financial base for local authorities in accordance with Article 151 of the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia. Pillar 4, enhancing human development. Mr. Speaker, human development plays a critical role in promoting inclusive growth and laying a foundation for future prosperity. The 7th National Development Plan identifies the 3 components of human development, namely health, education, skills development, and improved access to water, supply, and sanitation. Health. Mr. Speaker, health is key to enhancing productivity and the welfare of our people. In strengthening health system, priority will be on completing ongoing construction of health infrastructure, ensuring availability and timely supply of drugs, procurement of medical equipment, recruitment of health personnel, and the promotion of innovative health financing. Mr. Speaker, in 2017 budget address, I informed the House that the construction of the 350 health posts will be completed this year. As at the end of August, a total number of 275 health posts have been completed and operational. Further, Matero Chilenge clinics have been upgraded to first-level hospitals, while 35 hospitals are at various stages of completion. Other projects will include modernization and upgrading of various hospitals are still underway. In order to increase access to health services, government will in 2018 continue to construct and upgrade health facilities across the country, as well as procure modern equipment. Mr. Speaker, government will introduce measures to strengthen local manufacturing of drugs, thereby assuring security of supply. This will also create employment opportunities for our people and conserve foreign exchange. Sir, in order to ensure timely and adequate availability of essential medicine, government will establish an additional hub in Dola this year. In 2018, government will establish 2 more hubs in Mansa and Pika and a sub-hub in Kabompo, Honorable Ufuma. Further, Mr. Speaker, government has also put in place prefabricated storage facilities at district level to increase storage capacity and ease drug accessibility. Mr. Speaker, Human resource for health remains a critical component in the provision of quality health services to the Zambian people. In 2018, government will recruit 1,000 health personnel to add to the 7,400 already recruited this year. Mr. Speaker, government in 2018 will establish a social health insurance scheme to increase the resource envelope and enhance universal health coverage. This social health insurance bill will be tabled before this August House. Mr. Speaker, in order to enhance health service delivery, government will in 2018 focus on prevention, control, and treatment of communicable and non-communicable diseases. Government will also focus on reproductive, maternal, nocturnal, child health, adolescent health, nutrition, and health promotion. Further, government will introduce e-services in the health institution, starting with the university teaching hospital. Education and skills development. Mr. Speaker, education and skills development is vital to ensure a high-quality labor force that is necessary to foster development. In this regard, the focus of government is to ensure increased access to quality education at all levels. This will be achieved by focusing on construction and rehabilitation of education facilities at all levels, provision of equipment and learning materials, recruitment of teachers, and creating sustainable financing mechanisms for higher education institutions. Mr. Speaker, as part of the long-term financing solution for the technical education and vocational and entrepreneurship training, government this year will continue with the Skills Development Fund. So far, 105 million has been raised. Mr. Speaker, in 2018, the focus in primary education subsector will be to continue increasing access to and improving quality of primary education. Infrastructure development in the primary education subsector will focus on the completion of schools under construction and the rehabilitation of classrooms. With regard to secondary education, government will focus on the implementation of the two-tier system, which offers learners the opportunity to follow an academic or vocational career. Sir, at tertiary education level, in 2017, government committed to work towards the operationalization of higher education loan and scholarship scheme. I'm pleased to inform this August House that the government has established the Higher Education Loans and Scholarship Board to oversee the operations of the scheme. Mr. Speaker, government in 2018 will continue with the construction of universities, university colleges specialized in the fields of science, technology, mathematics, and performing arts. Further, government is committed to construction of ongoing infrastructure and equipment at the VETA institutions. Water supply and sanitation. Sir, in my last address to the House, I allocated a total of 390 million for the water supply and sanitation programs throughout the country. I'm pleased to report to this August House that this investment has resulted in the drilling of 1,340 boreholes, the construction of 10 small water schemes in rural areas, and a further 600 boreholes have been rehabilitated. This investment will support the provision of safe and clean water to 600,000 households in rural areas. Mr. Speaker, water and sanitation infrastructure are being constructed and upgraded in the urban and peri-urban areas. Key is the Fuel Bulk Water Supply Improvement Project under the Millennium Challenge account, aimed at increasing water supply to 110 million liters of water per day to Lusaka and surrounding areas. Sir, in 2018, focus will also be on unbundling the arrears owed to contractors and suppliers in order to complete the ongoing water and sanitation projects. Mr. Speaker, investment in the water supply and sanitation sector will only yield tangible results if accompanied by supportive policy and legislative reforms. In this regard, government will bring to this House amendments to the Water Supply and Sanitation Act number 28 of 1997 in order to strengthen legislation surrounding the provision of water and sanitation systems in Zambia. Pillar 5, the last pillar. Creating a conducive governance environment for a diversified and inclusive economy. Policy, regulatory, and structural reforms. Mr. Speaker, legal, policy, and regulatory structural reforms are critical to creating a conducive governance environment that supports a diversified and inclusive economy. Government will therefore continue its reform agenda in fiscal, land administration and management, in debt management, and in monetary and financial sector systems. Fiscal policy. Mr. Speaker, during 2017, government commenced the implementation of measures aimed at restoring fiscal fitness in order to attain growth and development under the Economic Stabilization and Growth Program. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, government will continue to implement these measures in 2018, aimed at restoring budget credibility, transparency, and policy consistency, while scaling up social protection. Government will also ensure that the allocation to health and education sectors as a proportion of total budget is protected. Mr. Speaker, domestic resource mobilization will be enhanced and subsidies will gradually be reduced. These resources will be channeled to areas with higher socio-economic returns. Mr. Speaker, under the Economic Stabilization and Growth Program, government has undertaken to restore budget credibility and stability. In doing so, Mr. Speaker, enhanced domestic resource mobilization will therefore be a pillar to achieving the objective, complemented by policies that ensure that expenditure is maintained within affordable levels. Mr. Speaker, in 2018, government will implement measures that ensure that the tax system is simpler and fair in order to expand the tax base and increase compliance. At the moment, the compliance levels are at 52. Mr. Speaker, this will be through continued modernization and automation of revenue collection processes, coupled with upscaling in taxpayer education and services. In addition, tax incentives will be rationalized, while audit functions will be augmented to address base erosion and profit shifting. Mr. Speaker, on the expenditure side, the measures will be: 1, concentrate resources in areas that facilitate economic diversification, including ongoing projects so as to realize value for money. 2, prioritize the dismantling of arrears. 3, control the growth in wage bill by limiting recruitments to critical sectors and undertaking a cleanup of the payroll. 4, limit the fiscal deficit in order to ensure sustainability of debt. And 5, pursue project financing through public-private partnership. Mr. Speaker, to support and anchor fiscal prudence, government will further carry out legal reforms that include 1, the revision to the Public Finance Act to make it more punitive to cases such as abuse and misappropriation of funds. 2, the revision of the Public Procurement Act to ensure value for money and introduce benchmarking of prices and the requirements for project appraisal prior to granting of tender approvals. Fire tender. Mr. Speaker, we are fixing the law, not the processes. 3, is good for democracy. 3, enactment of planning and budgeting bill that will anchor budget and planning preparation in law, enhance the participation by citizens, including members of parliament. 4, pension reforms, including reforming public pension funds, enacting the Social Protection Bill. Sir, to maximize the national benefits from our mineral assets, government has been implementing the Mineral Value Chain project. This is intended to foster mutual accountability and transparency in the management of our mineral resources. I'm pleased to report, Mr. Speaker, that 9 of the major mines have now been migrated to reporting their production figures on a full-time basis on the electronic system. Mr. Speaker, also 2 laboratories for assaying mineral quality will soon be fully operational. Mr. Speaker, in April 2017, government announced a 3-month amnesty on interest and penalties for taxpayers who had outstanding tax liabilities with the Zambia Revenue Authority. Owing to the overwhelming response of 1.3 million applications from taxpayers, government extended the amnesty to 15th of September 2017. Sir, government is greatly indebted to the taxpayers for responding to the amnesty. Government will continue to support those that have got time to pay agreements within the allowable time. Mr. Speaker, to enhance the performance orientation of the budget and align it to the development outcomes in the 7th National Development Plan, government is migrating the budget to output-based budgeting. In 2018, the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services will join the 2 education ministries in having output-based budgeting. For the 2019 budget, the output-based budget will be rolled out to all the ministries, provinces, and other spending agencies. Land administration and management. Mr. Speaker, Access to land is critical to the achievement of our economic diversification agenda, the reduction in poverty and vulnerability, as well as reducing inequalities amongst our citizens. I indicated in my 2017 budget address that the government will commence the land titling program, starting with the pilot of sites in Lusaka. I'm glad to report to this august House that this pilot has been concluded. Some government will, in 2018, roll out the National Land Titling Pilot Program with the aim of issuing title for at least 30,000 pieces of land. This titling program will significantly contribute to the generation of government revenue. Debt management policy. Mr. Speaker, government undertook a deliberate and ambitious infrastructure development program in order to address the binding constraints to growth caused by the poor state of economic infrastructure. The objective was to create a platform for sustained and inclusive growth. Sir, the financing of this ambitious program has entailed accumulation of debt. However, government is cognizant of the fact that the risk on our debt portfolio has heightened, worsened by the economic imbalances faced in 2015 and 2016 when economic growth was subdued. Mr. Speaker, to address these concerns, the government has published the medium-term debt management strategy that seeks to return the debt to low-risk debt distress. The strategy outlined measures to drastically reduce the rate of debt accumulation, attain a cheaper and longer debt maturity profile. In addition, future borrowings will be undertaken strictly within sustainable levels. The strategy also defines measures towards the refinancing of the 3 euro bonds and the dismantling of the stock of arrears. Under this strategy, government will also continue to utilize public-private partnership and joint ventures to finance projects and reduce the burden on Treasury. Mr. Speaker, as part of the transparency and good governance that is a cornerstone of this government, I will, during this session of Parliament, present a bill to repeal the Loans and Guarantees Authorization Act. The bill I'll be presenting will provide for enhanced oversight over borrowing activities of government by having the National Assembly approve the loans before they are contracted. So all the loans will be brought for you honorable members to approve. Honorable Combo. This is in line with the provisions of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, asset management, state-owned enterprises. Mr. Speaker, the government will put in place a robust asset management system for all state-owned enterprises to assess their viability and sustainability. A comprehensive monitoring and evaluation framework will be developed to ascertain compliance of state-owned enterprises to corporate governance and operational efficiency. This will ensure that state-owned enterprises contribute to domestic revenues, employment creation, and economic growth. Capital markets. Sir, capital markets in Zambia have remained highly underdeveloped and underutilized. The high cost of financing in the banking sector makes the case for development of capital market as a cheaper source of raising finance imperative. Government will therefore be working to address this challenge. Mr. Speaker, monetary and financial sector policies. Mr. Speaker, monetary policy will remain focused on maintaining price stability and will continue to utilize market-based instruments in line with the medium-term target range of 6 to 8%. In the foreign exchange market, the Bank of Zambia will continue to pursue a flexible exchange rate regime, and interventions in the foreign exchange market will be limited to smoothing volatility in the exchange rate and building international reserves. Mr. Speaker, the Bank of Zambia will continue to enhance the forward-looking monetary policy framework anchored on the policy rate as they signal for the monetary policy stance. This is intended to improve the transmission of price signals and reduce reliance on non-price tools in the conduct of monetary policy. Mr. Speaker, the government remains steadfast in its commitment to financial sector stability. The Financial Sector Assessment Plan, undertaken in mid-2016, identified a number of issues, risks, and reforms needed to be addressed to support financial stability and financial development and inclusion. Largely, Mr. Speaker, the required reforms were to review and update various pieces of legislation that involve regulation and supervision of the financial sector, modernization of payment systems, and the protection of depositors. The Bank of Zambia is strengthening its supervisory capacity and enhancing its collaboration within the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Pension Insurance Authority as regulators of the financial sector. Mr. Speaker, the government is also reviewing the Bank of Zambia Act and the National Payment Systems Act. Further work is ongoing to update a depositor protection bill. These pieces of legislation will be brought to this August House in the due course. Other pieces of legislation that support the financial sector is the Insolvency Bill, which is already tabled in the House. Mr. Speaker, with respect to insurance, the government will repeal and replace the Insurance Act to strengthen governance and financial soundness. The bill also seeks to implement macroinsurance and require citizens to insure locally and save for the reinsurance. Mr. Speaker, government is finalizing the development of the financial sector development policy. Its overall objective is to have a well-developed, competitive, and inclusive financial sector that supports the efficient resource mobilization and access to financial services and products by all. The policy will promote financial stability, financial inclusion, deposit protection, among others. Mr. Speaker, to accelerate financial inclusion, government will, over the next 5 years, implement the National Financial Inclusion Strategy. The overall objective of the strategy is to increase access, usage of a broad range of quality and affordable financial services. This is important in promoting the participation of marginalized populations in rural and peri-urban areas in business and economic affairs of the country. The target is to increase financial inclusion from 59% to 80% by 2022. Mr. Speaker, public investment management reforms. The government has in recent years increased investment in public infrastructure to facilitate economic development and service delivery. To strengthen coordination in the preparation and implementation of public investment projects, government will establish a public investment management system. This system will provide standardized procedures and guidelines in the identification, preparation, appraisal, and implementation of public investment projects to ensure efficiency and attainment of value for money. In this regard, government will in 2018 establish a feasibility study fund to facilitate undertaking of the feasibility studies for major public investment projects before being considered for financing in the budget. Mr. Speaker, the external sector policy. Mr. Speaker, government policy in the external sector will remain anchored on the maintenance of an open economy with a competitive and market-driven foreign exchange rate. The focus will be on promoting a diversified export base to increase exports, increase foreign direct investment inflows, and maintain international reserve of at least 3 months of import cover. Mr. Speaker, the International Monetary Fund Program. IMF. Mr. Speaker, government's response to the economic challenges that faced the nation in the second half of 2015 and most of 2016 had to be confronted with bold reforms and measures. The measures outlined in the Economic Stabilization and Growth Program were based on domestic solutions. The Economic Stabilization and Growth Program provides for measures to restore budget credibility and sustainability, enhance domestic resource mobilization, improving economic and fiscal governance, ensuring economic stability and growth and job creation, whilst protecting the poor. Mr. Speaker, in implementing these measures, government saw the need to collaborate with both external and internal partners. Key among the external partners in this process is the International Monetary Fund. In doing so, we have been engaged in intense discussions with IMF based, Mr. Speaker, on programs and targets we have set for ourselves under the Economic Stabilization and Growth Program. A lot of progress has been made thus far, with key structural and regulatory reforms implemented, based on the spending plans presented in the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework, MTEF, and the budget that I'm presenting today. Government will continue to engage the fund in October 2017 to set an agreeable macroeconomic framework that takes into account our spending and financing plans over the MTEF period and provides a platform to conclude the program. Mr. Speaker, Part 4, the 2018 budget. The 2018 budget. Sir, I now present the 2018 national budget, which lays out the various expenditure and revenue measures aimed at achieving government policy objectives. Mr. Speaker, the government proposes to spend a total of 71.6 billion in 2018, or 25.6% of GDP. Of this amount, 49.1 billion, or 68.5% of the total budget will be financed by domestic revenue, 2.4 billion, or 3.4% by grants cooperating partners. The balance of 20.1 billion or 28.1% of the budget will be financed through domestic and external borrowings. Sir, in line with the 7th National Development Plan, the allocations in this budget are targeted at addressing the 5 strategic areas of economic diversification, job creation, poverty reduction, reducing inequalities, enhancing human development, and creating a conducive governance environment for a diversified and inclusive economy. Mr. Speaker, I now present the 2018 budget by functions of government. 2018 expenditure by function. 1. General public services. Sir, I propose to spend 25.9 billion on general public services. Significant outlays under this category include 7.3 billion and 7 billion for external and domestic debt repayment, respectively. Mr. Speaker, in our resolve to fiscally empower our local authorities and ensure equitable distribution of resources, I have allocated 1.1 billion to the Local Government Equalization Fund. This represents, Mr. Speaker, 22% increase on the 2017 levels. Mr. Speaker, in the same vein, I have allocated for Honorable Mwimbu the Constituency Development Fund simply put CDF, a total of 218.4 million to support projects at community level. Economic affairs. Mr. Speaker, the economic affairs function plays a major role in our quest to achieve a diversified economy that delivers more jobs. Accordingly, I propose to spend a total of 17.3 billion or 24% of the budget on the economic affairs function. A significant allocation under this function is 8.7 billion for road infrastructure investment. Mr. Speaker, let me repeat. A significant allocation under this function is 8.7 billion for road infrastructure construction and rehabilitation. This will include the continuation of the Link, Zambia 8000, the C400, the L400 project. To complement these efforts, government will further undertake significant works to rehabilitate and upgrade feeder roads across the country through the Rural Connectivity Program. Mr. Speaker, in order to improve airport infrastructure in the country, a total of 940.5 million has been allocated for the construction of the Kenneth Kaunda and Copperbelt International Airports. Once completed, these investments will reposition Zambia into a regional air transport hub. Sir, to facilitate the provision of agriculture inputs to 1 million beneficiaries, I have allocated 1.8 billion to the Farmer Input Support Program, which will be implemented through the e-voucher system. That will be good for you. I I have also allocated 1.1 billion to facilitate the maintenance of our strategic food reserves at 500 metric tons. Mr. Speaker, in order to make rural areas attractive for investment and promote rural industrialization, government will continue with its rural electrification program to ensure access to electricity in rural areas. Accordingly, 251.3 million has been allocated to rural electrification. May I add that there will be more money from the cooperating partners, so there will be lights everywhere. Mr. Speaker. Education and skills development. Sir, I propose to spend 11.6 billion on education and skills development. This will facilitate spending on, among others, infrastructure development, student loans, teacher recruitment, and procurement of school prerequisites. Health. Mr. Speaker, I propose to spend 6.8 billion on health. Of this amount, 1.2 billion is for the procurement of essential drugs and medical supplies, representing 56% increase over 2017. The balance will be used to finance health infrastructure, medical equipment, staff costs, including recruitment of personnel, housing and community community amenities. Sir, I propose to spend 816.3 million on housing and community amenities. Of this amount, 564.5 million is for water supply and sanitation. This allocation will supplement the expenditure by the commercial water utilities. Public order and security. Public order and security. Mr. Speaker, I have allocated 2.1 billion towards the maintenance of public order and safety. I have allocated 2.1 billion for the maintenance of public order and safety. Key interventions will include the recruitment of security personnel, the recruitment of security personnel, continued rehabilitation and construction of infrastructure, and the modernization of operations of law enforcement agencies. Social protection. Mr. Speaker, to reduce vulnerability and inequities amongst our people, I have allocated 2.3 billion for social protection related expenditure. Significant provision under these functions include 1.1 billion for public service pension funds and 721 million for social cash transfer scheme. The allocation for food security packs has been doubled to 140 million. And other functions. Mr. Speaker, the remaining functions of defense, environmental protection and recreation, culture and religion have a combined total of 4.9 billion. Mr. Speaker, revenue estimates and measures. Sir, resource mobilization to support the 2018 budget is anchored on enhancing tax administration through improved taxpayer services, risk management, enforcement, and compliance. This is necessary to ensure that resources are mobilized at a cost-effective and non-distortive manner. Mr. Speaker, taking various demands into account, the government had to find a balance that would provide a fair taxation and at the same time garner sufficient resources to deliver public services and spearhead development. The details of revenue and borrowing estimates are as follows. Revenue measures. Rationalization of tax relief. Mr. Speaker, I propose to discontinue the 5-year income tax holidays that is facilitated through the Zambia Development Agency. I propose to discontinue the 5-year tax holidays that is facilitated through the Zambia Development Agency. In its place, Mr. Speaker, I propose to grant accelerated depreciation for capital expenditure by qualifying investment in priority areas. Mr. Speaker, I also propose to remove the allowable deduction for contributions to approved pension funds of 255 kwacha per month, as there is already relief given at the time one gets their lump sum payment and annuities. Strengthening the tax base. Mr. Speaker, intellectual property such as trademarks, patents, brands, are assets that can be traded. However, such trades are currently not taxed, unlike the case with other properties such as shares, mining rights, and land. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I propose to introduce property transfer tax at 5% on the transfer of intellectual properties. Mr. Speaker, to cast our tax net wider, I propose to impose a property transfer tax at the rate of 5% on the value attributable to a Zambian asset in cases where indirect ownership or control of the Zambian asset changes outside the Republic. If it's a Zambian asset, you sell it abroad, I also must get some tax. Sir, the record of the patriotic front in delivering infrastructure to the people is unmatched. Sir, the record of the patriotic front government in delivering infrastructure to the people is unmatched. To assist, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, to assist in mobilizing funds for the Infrastructure Development Fund, I propose an excise duty of 2 kwacha per 50 kg of cement. Let me repeat. Sir, the record of the Patriotic Front government in delivering infrastructure to the people is unmatched. To assist in mobilizing funds for the Infrastructure Development Fund, I propose to introduce an excise duty of 2 kwacha per 50 kg of cement. Speaker, the government in 2004 introduced a presumptive tax for individuals operating public service vehicles based on seating capacity. However, these amounts have not been adjusted since 2004. I therefore propose to adjust the presumptive tax rates upwards by 50%. Mr. Speaker, the Commissioner General can charge a base tax where there is insufficient information on which to estimate tax payable by a business. Currently, Mr. Speaker, the base tax is 150 kwacha per annum. Currently, the base tax is 150 kwacha per annum and has remained at this level since 2008. I therefore propose to adjust upwards the base tax rate from 150 kwacha to 365 kwacha, meaning 1 kwacha per day. Mr. Speaker, it is international practice that related parties are treated the same way under certain rules such as transfer pricing. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, I propose to mandate all businesses to disclose their related parties for income tax and property tax purposes. Sir, in order to provide further clarity, I propose to revisit the definition of residence for persons other than individuals, as well as the definition of management and consultants' fees. Mr. Speaker, in order to prevent revenue leakages through misallocation, I propose, 1, to align the excise duty at 125% on methylated spirits, denuated alcohol, and unrated alcohol of heading 2207. Introduce registration of all importers of spirits and alcohol. Mr. Speaker, I propose to increase customs duty on unmanufactured tobacco and tobacco refuse to 25% from 15%. This will harmonize the tax treatment with all other types of tobacco which are currently attracting a customs duty at 25%. Mr. Speaker, I further propose to introduce specific excise duty on manufactured tobacco, provided for a separate tax classification other than manufactured, for which is currently classified together with cigarettes. Mr. Speaker, support to business growth and diversification. Sir, diversifying away from dependence on mining is key to attaining economic resilience. I therefore propose, 1, to remove customs duties on various inputs that are used in the manufacture of stock feeds and fish feed. 2, exempt unprocessed and semi-processed tobacco from VAT. Mr. Speaker, in my last address, I introduced a surtax on selected imported products that are locally produced in order to support the growth of the domestic industry. In line with this policy, I propose to extend the number of items on which the surtax applies and also to remove raw materials that were erroneously put on the surtax schedule. Sir, I also propose to reduce customs duty on bricks that are used in the formation of furnaces from 15% to 5% to reduce the cost of manufacturing. Mr. Speaker, risk management is a critical part of any business. As such, any undertaking to cover risk of the insured and the insurer must be cost effective. To reduce the cost of insurance, Mr. Speaker, I propose to remove the insurance premium levy on reinsurance. Mr. Speaker, to discourage the use of inefficient electrical appliances and to encourage the use of alternative sources such as solar, gas, I propose to increase customs duty on electrical geysers and stoves to 40% from 25%. Mr. Speaker, to promote the use of electronic payment devices and make it easier to collect and monitor taxes, I propose to remove the customs duty on point-of-sale machines and SIM cards. So no tax on SIM cards. Mr. Speaker, streamlining of the penalty regime. Mr. Speaker, I propose to introduce penalties in the VAT Act and the Customs and Excise Act for taxpayers that fail to furnish records upon request, and similarly for those who fail to issue tax invoices. If you fail to issue a tax invoices, I'm introducing a penalty and a fine. Submission of returns and payment. Mr. Speaker, I propose to change the due dates for the submission of VAT returns from the 16th to the 18th of every month. This will differentiate this date from the date for submitting withholding tax return, which also falls on the 16th of every month. Sir, I also propose to provide for the same due date of the 14th of every month for the submission and payment of withholding tax to ease compliance and improve tax administration. Housekeeping. I propose to make amendments to the Income Tax Act, the Property Transfer Act, the Value Added Tax Act, the Customs and Excise Act, and the Skills Levy Development Acts. This is intended to update, strengthen, and remove ambiguities in certain provisions of the tax legislation to make tax administration much more effective. These measures will be revenue neutral. Non-tax revenues. The measures. Sir, in order to improve service delivery of public broadcasting and promote growth of the media industry, I propose, 1, to introduce a landing right charge at the rate of 3,150 per television channel which has less than 35% local content except for educational and scientific channels. Mr. Speaker, I propose to increase the TV levy to 5 kwacha Mr. Speaker, I propose to increase the TV levy to 5 kwacha from 3 kwacha per month. With all these digital things, better quality, better everything. competition through electricity bills to subscriber management service licensing systems. It will no longer be on the electricity bill. Mr. Speaker, in line with the strategy of moving towards a prosperous smart Zambia, I propose to migrate all motor vehicles to the electronic number plate system at a reduced cost of 500 from the current re-registration of 975. Mr. Speaker, this system will enhance security, enable ease payment of various road user charges such as road tolls, as well as renewals of driver's licenses online. Mr. Speaker, in order to ensure that government collects the much needed revenue on a cost-reflective basis, I propose, Honorable Kambwidi, I propose to revise upwards the fees and charges collected by the various government institutions that have not been revised for a long time. Mr. Speaker, the total, such as landing rights, which are 2 kwacha now. Mr. Speaker, the total net revenue gains from the various measures I have proposed is above 2.9 billion kwacha. Sir, tax and non-tax revenue measures that I have announced today will take effect on 1st January 2018. Mr. Speaker, Part 4, conclusion. Mr. Speaker, with the launch of the 7th National Development Plan, our country has renewed its commitment to the attainment of the Vision 2030 to be a prosperous middle income. We must learn from our past challenges if we have to move to charter the designed path to our destination. We must strive to foster unity of purpose in advancing our nation's interest and the well-being of our people. Mr. Speaker, we must remain resolute and patriotic, never allowing our sights to slip from the development goals we have set ourselves. Sir, let me assure this august House that our future is bright and secured under the able leadership of His Excellency Mr. Edgar Chagwalungu. Mr. Speaker, let me repeat. Let me assure this House that our future is bright and secure under the able leadership of His Excellency Mr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu. Mr. Speaker, with His Excellency's vision, 2019 we are on the path to making our great nation a prosperous and more inclusive society. Mr. Speaker, the patriotic government is, however, cognizant of the fact that this is not an easy path. There are risks and challenges at every turn. We must therefore remain...
Honorable
Mr. Speaker.
Just give me a minute. Let the minister conclude in silence. Let him conclude in silence. Order. Let's have some order.
Mr. Speaker, we must therefore remain physically disciplined for us to achieve the desired physical fitness. We must sacrifice and raise more from our resources to finance our development. We must borrow less, and where we need to borrow, it should be for projects that generate growth and enable us to repay. We must ground our aspirations on a realistic understanding that our current financial position should form the platform. Sir, let me add, Mr. Speaker, in the words of our founding father, that we should, as a people, resist the temptation to translate diversity into adversity. Mr. Speaker, we all have and see common values. We all have a common denominator. We all have aspirations for basic minimums. And that is why we say, Mr. Speaker, one land, one nation is our cry. We must rise like an eagle up in the sky, rising above our differences, marching relentlessly to attaining the vision that we have set for ourselves, the Vision 2030. The 2018 budget, Mr. Speaker, is a practical instrument that has defined practical measures to diversify the economy, to reduce the poverty, to create jobs, and to minimize inequalities. In arriving at our destination, Mr. Speaker, we are one. We are one. We are one. Mr. Speaker, the questions that I hear that are raised in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, are about the energy and the glue that bonds democracy. And it will be important to continue to question so that together, as leaders, we can provide the leadership, the unity, without fear or favor. Mr. Speaker, I submit the 2018 budget. I beg to move.
Order, 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 order. Order, order, order. The question is, that the House do now resolve into Committee of Supply on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the year 1st January 2018 to 31st December 2018, presented to the National Assembly in September 2017. Any further debate? The Honorable Member for Chiluvi.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to be the first member to debate the motion of supply moved by the Honorable Minister of Finance. On the presentation of the national budget for 2018. Sir, firstly, allow me to congratulate the Honorable Minister of Finance for the able manner in which he has presented the 2018 national budget. Mr. Speaker, the speech has covered important developmental issues that border on the economy of our country and require digesting and careful analysis by all honorable members. It is therefore important that we defer debate on this motion to Tuesday, 3rd October 2017, in order to give ample time to honorable members of this August House to study the budget speech efficiently. This way, honorable members will be able to come back to debate the serious issue in the speech more meaningfully and constructively. With these few words, I wish to propose that the debate on the motion by the Honorable Minister of Finance be deferred to Tuesday, 3rd October 2017. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Any further debate? Order. Order. Honorable Member for Kantanshi.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for according me this opportunity to support the proposal by the Honourable Member of Parliament for Chiluvi Parliamentary Constituency that the debate on the motion of the supply moved by the Honourable Minister of Finance be deferred to Tuesday, 3rd October 2017. Honourable members who agree with me that the issues contained in the budget speech have an impact on the life of every Zambian citizen. Sir, for this reason, it is important that more time is accorded to honorable members to carefully scrutinize the budget, which has just been presented, so that we can engage in meaningful debate on the issues raised in the speech. In this regard, I wish to support the proposal to adjourn the debate on the motion to Tuesday next week. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
The proposal is agreed to. The debate on the motion is adjourned to Tuesday, 3rd October 2017. Acting Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I beg to move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is that the House do now adjourn any debate, any objection. The question is agreed to. The House is now adjourned.